How important is it that these conferences have a diverse group of people speaking from the front, leading music, and that
it's a really big deal. So during the, I told you there were 4 years where I stopped doing them, and one of the things that was really significant for me, and I've always said since then, like, dude, every speaker, every kind of career, like speaker at these Steubenville conferences should take at least one summer and just sit in the crowd, dude. Sit with a group of kids, you know, like be a chaperone, bring a group, and just, you have to sit through every talk. You see just how long everything is. But the other cool thing is, like, you see some of the stuff that, like, when you're like a part of ministry that you kind of pick apart, like, oh, this could have been better. Like, you see, like, there is a genuine anointing that's bigger than just like being a good speaker or having a good musician or whatever. So it's both sides. But one of the times during those 4 years, I was with a group of our teens, and at that conference, Brian Greenfield was speaking. Yeah, you friends with him? He's a good dude, man. And he is a black speaker who is awesome and just very authentic, very engaging. And we had, a group of probably 25 kids that are all black. And some of these kids had actually come into the church. They'd gone through RSA. They're in the church. Some, they were new. But at the end of the, like, Saturday night, like, we sat around like a normal youth group and did sharing. And I was like, so what was most significant? What was the best part of the conference for you? And I'm so used to, like, youth groups being like adoration, and just one after another, they were like, oh, when that other black guy got up and was talking, like, it was so significant for them to see someone else that looked like them. Yeah. They're like, all I had ever seen is like a African priest that was like visiting the church. And you realize, like, man, like I'm not in that same boat, so you don't, like, I've been in some of those conversations where you're talking about speakers and you're like, we need more women speakers. We need more, like, diverse speakers and this and that. And you're like, you get that it's an important thing, but then seeing how significant it was, like, they remember every word he said, dude. And it was like so powerful for them to see, like, okay, here's someone who looks like me, who is also Catholic, and they don't always, like, I had one of my godsons who came into the church. Like, he told me once, like, and this is back kind of around some of the George Floyd stuff. It just, at times when Black Lives Matter, that stuff came out, and he was saying, like, I just am really struggling, like, some of these things. He was saying he was reading Malcolm X, and he was like, I just, I'm afraid, like, I just joined the white man's church, and I mean, in the end, I had to say to him, like, this isn't my cross, so I don't want to, like, be, like, unauthentic here by sharing, like, by saying, like, no, that's not the case. There's plenty minority, like, so I don't want to be insincere here, but, like, the one thing I told him is, like, the church has some deep roots in, in parts of the world that are filled with minorities. And if you look at the places in the world right now where the church is thriving, just absolutely thriving, there are places like Africa, like South America, like these places. So, like, it's not true that that's the case, but in his lived experience, that was the case, dude. It was, like, very much the case that, like, we go to this church over here, is mainly all white people, and we all sat in a couple pews that, like, here's the black people, like, and there was no intention of that, but, like, it was so significant for them to experience, and just like any of us, I want to hear someone talk to me about holiness or give me an example of holiness that I could relate to, that uses words that I like, that looks kind of like how I, and culturally, I mean, that's kind of what we all want. But so for them, it was wild,
I'm just relating here as you're speaking, like, as an Australian, I started a Life Teen parish in Brisbane, Australia, because that was the best thing in the church that looked like cool and like it could work. And even for me, I was like, all the analogies they use are American. Everything's American. It's baseball analogies, and, like, none of our kids get this. And so I could see someone saying, well, why are you so concerned about that? Like, and you're like, well, I'm concerned because we don't relate to it.
Right.
And so if I can see that,
totally,
then I can see why they
Yeah. And you realize, like, sometimes when I talk to youth ministry classes, I'm talking about mission work. You could say, okay, well, Tony over here is going to Zimbabwe to do mission work, and you're like, that's awesome. Tony, what do you know about Zimbabwe? Like, I don't know much, do you know what they eat? Do you know what kind of music they listen to? Do you know, like, what their day structure looks like? Do you know, like, what kind of songs they sing? You're like, no, I don't know any of that. You're like, well, you still can make an impact. Like, you could still go and paint some houses or give out balloons, hug people, and still, like, have some kind of impact. But, like, the amount of impact you could have would be so much greater if you realize that, like, people experience life, and furthermore, people experience God within culture, which is why it's, like, so important to not sidestep culture. It's like the tidal wave we talked about earlier. Like, culture is not just a tidal wave when it comes to bad stuff. Culture is also just, that's how we experience each other. It's how we experience God, and so for the church to do that, and I think that, when we study, like, missionary saints, it's always been at its best when we embrace culture. It's always been at its worst when we demonize culture or we forget about culture, So it's a pretty big deal. But I do think the church is aware of it, and I don't think that's the trend anymore, that we demonize it or that we sidestep it. I mean, it happens, but I don't think by and large people are trying to do that,
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe or you're a dingus. What's a dingus exactly?
Used to refer to something one cannot or does not wish to name specifically.
You don't have to subscribe, but if you did, I'd love it. You dingus.
Like the video. That's where we're using that one. Take